Heresy is finally here, gamers, and with that comes a bunch of new things, one being the brand new Arc Warlock aspect Ionic Sentry, which we are going to be using in a build focused around building up crazy fast bolt charges and supers. Now before we get into the video, if you guys do enjoy the content, a like and sub would be greatly appreciated. I'd also appreciate you stopping by my Twitch, where I'm live almost every day, so thank you. So this build's focus is to take advantage of Arc Warlock's insane Ionic trace creation to build up fast supers and bolt charges for some pretty solid damage. Now first, let's go over our brand new aspect Ionic Sentry. So on defeating targets with kinetic or arc weapons or arc abilities, to charge up an arc turret that periodically chains lightning between nearby targets, granting us a bolt charge stack with each hit. Now if you're familiar with Orb Lightning from PoE 2, it has a sort of similar, I guess, visual and gameplay use. Now it will also blind enemies in a short radius when you spawn it in, which is great for feeding into our other aspect, Electrostatic Mind, where defeating targets with arc abilities or defeating jolted or blinded targets spawns in an Ionic Trace. Ionic Traces will also make you amplified, which is really nice now, since amplification now grants us a 15% damage resist buff. This will allow us to fund into some good ability uptime alongside fast supers, thanks to our exotic armor of choice, and fast bolt charges. Now you might be wondering what bolt charge is. Well, it's basically an arc version of ignitions, but the buildup is actually a little bit different. Instead of it being a buildup of scorch, it's a buildup of stacks independent on yourself. I'd say it's more similar to how you build up gunpowder gamble, but how you build it up is just by dealing sustained weapon damage, and once you're at maximum stacks, which being 10, using any ability, note this does not need to be an arc ability, will cause a lightning strike at that target's location. So yeah, it's pretty good, and you know, the damage is pretty solid. Now we can actually have our Ionic Traces themselves build into bolt charge, and this is thanks to the fragment Spark of Discharge, where defeating targets with an arc weapon, roughly around 3 will spawn in an Ionic Trace. And the newly added bonus, picking up Ionic Traces, will grant us a stack of bolt charge. So now not only will dealing sustained weapon damage grant us bolt charges, so will our Ionic Traces that we're just going to be spawning a ton of. Now our other abilities and fragments that will help a lot in spawning even more traces are going to be either a pulse grenade or a blinding grenade. I probably lean a little bit more towards blinding grenade just for survivability's sake, with the fragments Spark of Shock to grant our grenades Jolt, and Spark of Ions, where defeating jolted targets and or targets with bolt charge spawn an Ionic Trace. This can be replaced with Spark of Resistance if you want a little bit more survivability in the build, since you're already going to be spawning in enough traces already. The last fragment used in this build is going to be Spark of Frequency, thanks to its newly added feature where being amplified gains extra bolt charge stacks from all sources, doubling the gains, making building into the big lightning strikes so quick. This is like a must-have for all bolt charge builds. So I feel like this is a pretty good time to finally go over our super and exotic armor piece of choice. So we're going to be utilizing Chaos Reach alongside Geomags, which just got a pretty beefy buff and small rework. So it now grants us 7% super energy per Ionic Trace, up from what was 2% per trace, which is a massive buff, which is going to help us fund into some insanely fast supers. And a new feature where sprinting near max bolt charge grants stacks over time. And from my testing, it's at roughly the 7 stack point it starts to build up from sprinting, but it's been a little buggy and sometimes doesn't work. But when it does, it's very, very nice feature, since you're just basically able to build into bolt charge even faster, which is awesome. Now I do want to say one thing, when you do use Chaos Reach, is that using Ionic Sentry on the boss beforehand will allow you to actually build into bolt charge while using your super, since the chaining from Ionic Sentry grants stacks of bolt charge. And this will allow you to maybe hit like 1 or 2 chunks of damage throughout your entire time of using your super. So it's a pretty cool little buff. So just make sure if you can to use one beforehand. If you can't get it because there's no enemies or anything, not a big deal. But hey, free damage is free damage. Exotic weapon of choice is going to be the brand new primary ammo trace rifle Lodestar, which I don't know about y'all, but I think this thing is pretty damn solid. It is a trace rifle, so of course its damage is kind of meh, but it has some really cool features that make it really strong in arc-centric builds. And so what you want to do with it is utilize its scope down mode against arc debuffed enemies, since that can cause a blinding explosion, which helps fund into more Ionic traces and debuffs more enemies. And then when using its charged up mode, you want to hipfire to apply jolt to enemies, which you can then use in the scope down mode to get a damage buff against those enemies, and defeating them while scope down will get you the jolted and blinded defeats, so sometimes you can get double Ionic traces, which is really fun. Now the other weapons can really be whatever you prefer. I've been constantly using random weapons. The one thing that I've kind of been sticking to is I've been using Scatter Signal, since Fusion's just got a 30% damage buff, and I just kind of enjoy having a strand weapon for unraveling orbs and the other strand mods. Now I will leave the mods on screen for this build. There really isn't anything you specifically need. I'm just speccing into funding more ability uptime. You can copy and paste it if you want, or you can change things around, maybe if you want surges for Lodestar or something. Totally up to you. For stats though, I'm recommending 100 resilience, 100 discipline, and focusing everything else into either strength or recovery. Onto the artifact mods, and boys, there are some juicers here. I'm using overclock and load, so while I'm amplified or have bolt charges, arc weapons have increased handling and reload speed. Unraveling orbs, since I like to use a strand weapon as my special. Dielectric, so defeating arc debuffed enemies grants bolt charge stacks. Flashover, when gaining max bolt charge you become amplified. Your lightning bolts from your bolt charge deal more damage. Yeah, this one is huge, it is a necessity for this build. Horde Shuttle, so dealing damage to unraveled enemies occasionally spawns in a threadling, which is why I'm using Strand Special to apply Unravel, and then I can let Lodestar just go absolutely crazy and spam Unravel and threadlings. It's really fun. And lastly, we're going to be using Defibrillating Blast, where stunning a champion grants max stacks of bolt charge, triggers an arc bolt that heals you, and jolts combatants it damages. Now, the updates to arc didn't really interest me much at first glance, but finally getting my hands on it changed my opinion completely. I am really enjoying Arc Warlock again, and while I will say I don't think Ionic Sentry's damage is really all that good, I honestly find it kind of underwhelming. If you use it as a bolt charge battery, which I'm kind of wondering if that was their intention all along, you can start to build into some just super fun AoE constant damage spam. I mean, this build is great, but I feel like it's only scratching the surface on what we can do with bolt charge, and that really excites me for the future. Hope you guys are liking Heresy so far. I know it's only been a day, but I do think the episode is a vast improvement from any of the prior, and man, does it have me wanting to grind like crazy. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.